Hi, hello, I'm Hans. I'm an artist, intersex activist, and rose-tail half-moon beta fish. I'd made a video a few weeks ago talking about writing intersex characters, mostly the what not to do, so I wanted to make another video this week highlighting the what yes to do. So I'm going to talk about two examples of what I think are really great intersex characters, and hopefully there will be many more very soon. Number one is An Unkindness of Ghosts by Rivers Solomon. This is an Own Voices book. It's a science fiction adventure reminiscent of the work of Octavia Butler, and it centers around the main character, Aster. The most overarching plot of the book is that everyone lives on a spaceship with a caste system that is roughly modeled after American slavery in the South. Aster is born into the lower decks of this sort of caste system. Aster is considered lower rank, but she becomes a medical trainee. She's a scientific genius, and she's coded as kind of autistic. She has this way of understanding the world that is super matter-of-fact, super observational, and sometimes this comes in handy and sometimes it doesn't. The book opens with her amputating a child's foot in maybe the most cool and calm, detached way that you could think of. Aster is super bold, super curious, and is on a quest to find out information about her missing, possibly dead mother in all areas of the spaceship, whether the military-style law enforcement wants her in those places or not. So how are we clued into the fact that Aster is coded as an intersex character? Well, maybe those terms don't exactly exist in this book's universe, but there's a group of people in the story called Tarlanders. It seems that the Tarlander group is people who are all AFAB and who are capable of having children. So the members of the upper class seem to have otherized and racialized this group of Tarlander people, partially because they don't seem to have as expected sexual or reproductive anatomy. So this is one of the members of the upper class talking about how he views the Tarlander people. Even beasts of the field were made male and female, were they not? So they might multiply and spread the heaven's bounty. Tarlanders did not come male and female, everything but. The soldiers, the security forces, read Aster as different and say that given the peculiarities of Aster's physiology, it's likely that her other parent was a Tarlander. Then the main character, Aster, thinks this explained Aster's hairiness and muscular build, despite being born without the external organs that produced testosterone. Also, the themes of this are just screaming that an intersex person wrote it, like a society that thinks that surgeons are close to God because they can change people's bodies. So of course in this universe, modern terms like intersex don't exist, and there's a really awesome interview that I'll put a link to in the description where the author talks about this exactly, that yes, it's a choice to not acknowledge these modern terms in the context of the story. The author also says that they don't mind if people use those terms to describe the characters in the story, and that they do themselves. So in the author's words, the character Aster is a butch intersex lesbian, maybe agender. What I love about this character and what I love about this setup that I think works so well is that Aster isn't the typical feminine intersex character. It's not some secret that she's carrying or that she's ashamed of. Others recognize that she's different in more ways than one, but she's able to carry on her business regardless. She's able to use all of her gifts to help her community, and she's able to continue on her quest to find information about her mother who disappeared or died inside of the ship. I love the complexity of the character, that she's not reduced to it, but that sex difference is baked seemingly so effortlessly throughout the book. The second example that I found is also a book. This one, to my knowledge, is not Own Voices, but it is by a pretty popular author, Haruki Murakami, who I'm a huge fan of. So this is Kafka on the Shore. So sort of a slowly paced, beautiful, winding fiction story, which I think is what Murakami is known for. And the character in the book is named Oshima. Oshima is a young librarian, a hemophiliac, so he's medically vulnerable, has a blood clotting disorder where he can't get cuts, so he compensates for this by having a need for speed. He's a thrill seeker and he loves to drive fast. He serves as kind of a mentor, older brother figure for the main character Kafka, who runs away and needs to be protected from the police. So Oshima helps hide the main character in a cabin in the woods, then goes to carry on the rest of his cool life. He doesn't seem like a super major character because we don't see a lot of airtime, but he's still probably the coolest librarian I've ever read about. And librarians are generally pretty cool. So how do we know that Oshima is coded as an intersex character? Well, it was actually kind of frustrating because all the websites that I saw in this recognize him as, in the language that we would use now, a gay trans man. And none of them mention the intersex piece, even though to me, it's the clearest and most obvious disclosure that I've ever seen in any piece of media. So we get about halfway through the book in which Oshima is just recognized as a man, like we don't necessarily hear that there's anything different about him. Until one day these two TERF types come into the library where he's sitting at the desk, and they hand him brochures and kind of make a fuss about the library not having specifically women's bathrooms and only having gender-neutral bathrooms. And Oshima is just a straight shooter. He says, look, it's a single stall bathroom. Like, what is your problem? And then the two women are like, oh, you must hate women. You're some chauvinist male pig. He takes out his ID, chooses to show it to these bathroom protesters, and says, my ID says F. I lived the first part of my life in accordance with my ID. So he chooses to disclose in order to get these posers to buzz off. Then shortly later, when he's explaining his past to the main character, he says, in terms of sex, I'm most definitely female, though my breasts haven't developed much and I've never had a period. But I don't have a penis or testicles or facial hair. In short, I have nothing. A nice, no extra baggage kind of feeling. I had to reread this paragraph like 6 times because I have never seen my exact experience in a character before. When asked how he feels about this part of himself, Oshima says, a classic identity crisis. True words. And we barely hear anything else about this the whole rest of the book. Oshima lives as a man, is respected by all the other characters, and the story continues. So I actually think what's really cool about this is that it avoids 2 things that would usually be pitfalls, but to me don't seem like it in this case. So I talk sometimes about the problem of people trying to use intersex to justify being transgender and the issues that come with that. But I don't think that's what's happening here. It seems like those are 2 coexisting things. Oshima lives as a man and also just happens to have been born this way. And I'm sure there's also a lot of nuance and context here about the treatment of transgender people in Japan. Not something that I can speak to, but I'll put a couple links in the description, also partially just for me because I want to learn more about that too. And I think the second thing that can fall into being a trope or being harmful is sort of a big reveal moment. But I think how this subverts it is that the character was choosing to do it himself because he was annoyed, because he had a moral ground to stand on. And then it wasn't a big deal afterwards, right? Like he chose to use it to his benefit. I mean, I was a Murakami fan way before I read this one, but amazing. So those were 2 examples that I really appreciate, and I'm gonna reiterate what I think they both do super well. Number 1 is that the characters keep power in their disclosure. Anytime that others notice that there's difference or that they reveal that there's difference, they find a way to make it to their benefit, and it doesn't seem like that big of a deal. Number 2 is that the characters use disclosure or just their differences to work towards their morals, to work towards a world that has more nuance. So those characters are doing a service in addressing some of the deeper issues like binaries and rigidity in society. Number 3 is that these are just both super rich characters that have so much else going on. They're on epic adventures. And number 4 is that they don't fall into feeling like they have to be overly educational. I mean, maybe Oshima does this a little bit more, but they're not holding your hand through the vocabulary. They're not sitting there saying, intersex is when a person is born with a difference in... One thing that I also want to note here is that both of those examples are AFAB intersex characters. I haven't seen yet a lot of examples of AMAB intersex characters, and it's a distinction because those are very different experiences. So one more bonus, I also want to mention a story that does this in a really awesome way, and that is the short film Ponyboy by River Gaio. I think it's available to watch, I'll put a link in the description. And it's different than the other 2 that I mentioned because I think Ponyboy really leans into more exclusively focusing on the intersex element on purpose. It's about the trauma, it's about the medical backstory. It's about all of these things in the context of a person who runs away from home, who's a sex worker, and who's dreaming of love and freedom. And I also super relate to the character of Ponyboy personally because it's another intersex person, granted coming from AMAB side, but who was born without those hormone-producing organs and what that's like. So okay, are there any additions? Are there ones that are really good that I missed? Let me know down in the comments. Of course, if you like this video, if you learned something, hit those like and subscribe buttons, and I will see you next time.